Revival Memphis, the Memphis MA founder story, is brought to you by Mary Schooner and Jason Schooner, in memory of Joe Schooner. Revival Memphis, the Memphis MA founder story, is sponsored by Cushman Wakefield Commercial Advisors. Also sponsored by Denise Bollheimer, Katie and Tom Hutton, and Lyman D. Aldrich.
Memphis is one of the most exciting cities in the world. Frommer's travel guide just named Memphis one of the best places to go in 2019. CNN Travel named Memphis #1 in its list of the 5 best places to go in the world in the month of May. And why not? It's the home of the blues, soul, and birthplace of rock and roll. It's the distribution capital of planet Earth, the world headquarters of FedEx, the home of the nation's innkeeper, the city where Holiday Inns took off and transformed the hotel business worldwide. Memphis is the city that gave rise to the world's first supermarket, Piggly Wiggly. Our city is also known as the cotton and hardwood capital of the world. A survey of 9,000 high-achieving high school and college students, as well as young professionals, recently named Memphis-based St. Jude Children's Research Hospital as America's #1 dream employer, taking the top spot from Google. Stax Museum of American Soul attracts music lovers from across the planet, and the place where the blues was born, Beale Street, has become Tennessee's #1 tourist attraction. Thank you so much for joining us for this latest segment of Revival Memphis, the Memphis in May founder's story. The Memphis in May story is indeed one that should be remembered and known by Memphians because it set the stage for a whole lot of the success that our great community is enjoying right now. And we have 2 critical people who were involved in the very origins of Memphis in May International Festival joining us for this broadcast today. This event described by many as the rebirth of the city of Memphis. And this evening, 2 of the very special individuals who helped launch this worldwide recognized month-long festival join us celebrating Memphis are Rodney Baber and Miss Sandra Burke. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here.
Oh, it's a treat to have 2 of the founders who were so important and integral to the success of this great event. And Rodney, I'm going to begin with you because I'd like to begin talking about this festival. Back in 1977, when Memphis was struggling so much, we had a national recession. This is several years after Dr. King's tragic assassination in our city in 1968. And Memphis was really struggling. Our economy was struggling. You were an investment man down at Morgan Keegan. Tell us how you got connected to Memphis in May International Festival.
Well, I got a call from Lyman in '76 to come to a meeting in the Chamber of Commerce. And we met in the basement in a big conference room they had there, and there were 7 or 8 people there. And he gave us the story about the Memphis in May International Festival Society, which Lyman had moved up to be president of that. He was CERN. He said there's a lot more that we can do with this thing. And so he gave us a story on the background. Alfred Alperin had been to, the Edinburgh Festival, came back, said, why don't we do that in Memphis? And Memphis had 5 things going on: Cotton Carnival, Cotton Makers Jubilee, the Metropolitan Opera actually came to Memphis, Danny Thomas Golf Classic, and St. Jude Shower Stars. So they packaged that, and they would deal with it every year, but, there was a lot more potential there, and so Lyman calls us all together. And he pitches us on this thing, and it just blew me away. I just couldn't believe the potential I thought this thing would have. So I called him that night and said, I'm in, and I'd like to be chairman of events, because I wanted to help add the other things on there. So I got to be chairman of the events, and then was the 3rd president the year we honored Germany in '79. So that's how it started for me.
That's so exciting. All right, Sandra Burke, an educator who was in Detroit, I believe, before returning back home to Memphis. And you were working as a teacher
School social worker.
A school social worker in Memphis City Schools at the time.
Shelby County Schools.
In Shelby County Schools, all right. And Dr. Mose Yvonne Hooks,
Right.
who was also one of the founders of Memphis in May and the founder of the education component of Memphis in May, invited you to join this august group of people who were young and having fun, getting together and trying to figure out fun events for Memphis, right?
Right.
And so how did you get connected beyond that?
Well, Dr. Hooks came and asked me if I could spearhead the education committee for program for Shelby County Schools. And my superintendent said, yes, that is great. So I started that, and it just went, it was just overwhelming. The students and the kids, they loved it, and we celebrate countries. And then I was asked would I would be interested in being on the board. And I said yes. And from there, I became really involved, and I was co-chair and then chair of the Sunset Symphony, because many may know that I was a musician and classical, grew up in a
Classically trained
family.
pianist.
Yes, from 4 years old until still now. And so it was just a blend and a great way to come back to Memphis and be a part of a city that I love. And so from there, the Sunset Symphony just became one of the greatest events during Memphis in May, because Lyman and Aldrich had the event committee said they would like to have something, a Sunset Symphony, and he went to the Junior League, and from there was Robin and Jeann who came on board, and
Robin Davis and Jeann Arthur.
And Jeann Arthur, and so it evolved into other great things.
It evolved into something truly special. And Rodney mentioned that Germany was the honored country when he was the chairman that year. But there have been 38 countries honored in the great history of Memphis in May. Now, 2 or 3 of them have been honored twice. Japan, the Netherlands, and Canada have each been honored twice. But there have been many other countries honored. And what Sandra worked on so many years, which was in Memphis City Schools and in Shelby County Schools, was an actual curriculum about each honored country that went on for many years. And children who would not ordinarily have access to this kind of an education got to see people from these countries and learn through materials you all provided. So what a brilliant part of Memphis in May you were a key player in. Now, Rodney, let me go back to you and talk about the barbecue. You were part of the genesis of what we all regard as one of the greatest weekends in Memphis from 1978 to present. Tell us how this all started.
Well, I want to give Jack Powell, that worked at Morgan Keegan with me, credit here for uttering the words, you guys ought to do a barbecue contest. We were having a discussion in 1978, and it just immediately was a wonderful idea. And I called Lyman up and told him about it. He said, that's fantastic. So that was a big event, and we knew, really, we thought it would be what it's become, because it's such a huge tradition in Memphis and all of that. So we started that in '78, and we had some great people. Denise Bollheimer's here. She took the ball and ran with that, along with a lot of other really good people. But we had hundreds and hundreds of volunteers that came in for that. I think at one point we had 2,000 volunteers that would sign up every year during the volunteer sign-up.
2,500.
Yeah.
It rose to.
It was, it really, when it caught on, everybody wanted to be a part of it, and that's what made it so much fun.
And you were the events committee chairman,
Right.
so very quickly, there were many events associated with Memphis in May that became rather iconic. For example, the Memphis in May 10K international race was very popular. I've been in the running community for a long time, even though I set new standards in slowness and always finish last. I want you to know that race is cherished in the memories of the running community here. So could you kind of laundry list some of the other things that went
Sunset
on?
Symphony, Beale Street Music Festival. Irvin Stalkey was working on that, and he was, the grandfather of blues and music-related stuff in Memphis. And he heard about us, and we got together with him, and we told him what we were trying to do, and he threw in with us. He spent a lot of his own money that first year. And so we then had the Beale Street Festival. And then the second year, Holiday Inns came in and funded it to get it off really going the way it needed to go to become a big-time event. Barbecue was the second year, and there were like 15 people there. And I remember when the lady that won it walked up, and
Miss Kathy.
Yeah, she was wonderful. And of course now it's 225 teams and all that down on the river. The 10Ks races you mentioned, we thought about having a river race, and as we were looking out the river, a big tree goes floating by, and we all looked at each other and said, we're not going to do this one, okay? We'll go do something else. But then in the symphony, of course, with the junior league people coming in, the ladies came in and made that event, made a big contribution for that to happen. And you know, there are other things that were going on, but we would just add events every year. The educational committee was terrific because they put this into the city and Shelby County schools. And then the countries were honored. In the year that I was president in '79, we took 20 businessmen to Germany and toured for 2 weeks. Wow. With businesses over there. And we actually got several businesses to come back into Memphis and put a location in here.
Well, all of this has blossomed into what we see today. And Memphis in May says it had a $137 million economic impact last year in our community, helping to create 1,300 full-time jobs with tax revenues to our local community, adding up to $3.5 million. We're talking about a contribution, Sandra Burke, that you all made. Now, back in '77, our city, let's face it, history is history. It is what it is. Our city was racially divided. Our city was segregated. And what happened and what was different about Memphis in May is that a racially integrated board came together, and you were invited to become part of that. And if you could just talk for a moment about what that meant, and as you look back on the history of it and how things have developed and blossomed, and Memphis in May has become an iconic, successful month-long event, what it means to Memphis.
Well, I was very excited and honored because it was rare that you would be invited to be on a board back in that day. And then the excitement of the young people who were sitting around that table all had a vision, and they were ready to make a difference in their city. So being embraced, because sometimes you can be on a board, but you're not embraced. And we became embraced as a family. We had a mission, we want to execute, and we're going to make this the best ever. And that was always the thought process behind what we did as a part of being on the board of Memphis in May. So we set a stage that would say it can be done, and it should be done, and we must bridge the gaps. And by bridging those gaps, I think that was an involving of other organizations beginning to look at what we need to do to bring our city together and all the people who are part of our city.
But look what's happened when you start with an invitation to everyone, when there is diversity, when we welcome and we are welcoming and have that kind of a spirit in our hearts. Rodney, we get great fruit for our labor, and we get events that are iconic events, that are Memphis-themed events, that Memphis people would come downtown and re-embrace downtown in the Riverside. And these events have stood the test of time. Could I get you to
Well, getting the
share on
black
that?
and white community together on something was one of the things that we wanted to deal with and make the difference on. And race itself and the issues with Memphis never would come up other than the fact that it was just real important we had diversity and bring in some great people. Harold Shaw, George Brown, Mosavine Hooks led the education. That really was a really important ingredient in Memphis in May, and why we had success with it, because I think people knew that needed to be done, and we were doing that. So people got behind that, and that was very important to us.
When we look at the great momentum Memphis has now, when we look at the hot lists that Memphis is on, especially in the month of May, it must give you great satisfaction to know that you set the bar, you set the groundwork, you set the standard, Sandra, for all this great flowering and this blossoming that's come in the garden that is Memphis.
Well put.
Well, it's a delight to have both of you here today. The founders of Memphis in May, two of them are here and two are coming up next right here on Revival Memphis, the Memphis in May founder story. Coming up next, Jeann Arthur and Denise Bollheimer will join me on set here and share their vision and their memories and the great success that Memphis in May has been. Back with more of the founders, and thank you, founders, in just a moment.
Thanks, Jeann.
And welcome back to Revival Memphis, the Memphis in May founders story, and we are thrilled to have with us two of the key people who helped found the Memphis in May International Festival. We have Jeann Arthur with us, who was a big part of Memphis in May back at the beginning, and Denise Bollheimer. And Jeann was with marketing at Overton Square back in 1977, and Denise was a key player for Union Planters Bank, now Regions Bank, as a marketing expert with the bank back in those days. And Jeann, let's start with you. How did you get connected to Memphis in May?
I was asked by the Junior League to go hear about a new thing going on in town, and would I go to a meeting in the basement of the Chamber of Commerce? And I said, sure. But it was Lyman's idea of redoing a Chamber of Commerce thought, and it morphed into Memphis in May International Festival. The Junior League was the sponsor of the first Sunset Symphony, and Robin Davis and I were asked by the Junior League to serve as volunteers. So that's how we got there.
And you were there right at the beginning,
yes.
1977. And Denise, you came along from Union Planters at the time, and how did you get connected?
Well, the first barbecue contest had actually occurred in the parking lot of the Orpheum. And at the end of that contest, people said, I think we've got a winner. So the executive director of Memphis in May visited Dick Trappier, who happened to be the president of Union Planters, and said, we know you care about downtown Memphis. Downtown Memphis needs a boost. Would you be willing to sponsor a barbecue contest? And he said, well, we need to think about it. So he came down the hall and said, Denise, what do you think about it? And I said, yes, this sounds great. That's who we are. So he says, well, guess what? You're in charge. So I wasn't in charge of the contest, but I was in charge of the money. So eventually I got involved with the committee, and we started building a committee. And as the sponsors representative, I was sort of in charge of marketing for the barbecue contest. So I started promoting and doing press releases to foreign countries and to food writers and so forth. And we got on the map as an interesting event, and I'll tell you more about it later in the segment. We did some crazy things.
Well, it was brilliant. Well, off camera, you both were telling me you went down to Atlanta to a pork association event and let the world know down there that Memphis in May was having a barbecue festival.
We did. But what kicked it off was the most incredible thing. Denise and I went to the Peabody Hotel, which wanted to have some of our announcements. And we announced that we were going to Atlanta, but we were dressed as Miss Piggy and Santa Piggy. I was Santa Piggy in the Overton Square Dickens Christmas outfit, which I expropriated for the day. But we made front page news, and it's still coming up. I mean, it was just reintroduced in the Downtowner magazine, looking back, you know.
Well, and also part of that skit, so to speak, or event was as we drug a live pig into the city council chambers, Miss Piggy along with the committee. And this was back when Wythe Chandler was just starting to leave office as mayor. And so we cooked for the city council and the people that worked in the building there, and had Memphis officially declared the pork barbecue capital of the world. And that has stuck, because now you see Memphis-style barbecue all over the world. And it gave such a boost to the barbecue industry in Memphis that suddenly you had barbecue restaurants popping up all over the place.
It's remarkable. It's a big business now. Even in contesting, it's a big business. There are people who are making their living selling barbecue items and selling expertise
In the Memphis style.
contesting. Yes, indeed.
You know, so now that has a national, if not international, reputation to go with our music. I mean, it's natural.
So the Junior League was a key player in
Yes.
those early days because money was tight. The Memphis economy was in a very difficult spot.
Alicia Gilliland was the president, and she's always a Memphis supporter. And she got totally behind the idea after Lyman pitched it to her. And the Junior League gave the Sunset Symphony $5,000. We had a $62,000 budget that year. So you can imagine that that was a huge part of it. But
Wow.
have y'all, I think you know this, but did you know that we were sitting down there working in the heat? It was about 100 and something that weekend, and we had no walkie-talkies, and my face was as red as my clothes. But all of a sudden, this big black limousine pulls up almost to the river's edge. Tiff Bingham was down there, who was also on the board, and it was Mr. Plow and his driver. And the driver got out and presented a check to Tiff and to me and to Robin and a few other people standing by there. And Mr. Plow had put his stamp of approval on Memphis in May by sending another $5,000 donation. And along with the Tennessee Arts Council, we had that amount of money going into the Sunset Symphony and to underwrite other fees from the month, you know, other charges and costs. So it was quite exciting.
That is wonderful. And let's remember Tiff Bingham for a moment. Tiff
please.
was a dashing, handsome guy who was the president of the Chamber of Commerce and also a key player in the founding of the Memphis in May International Festival, who truly gave a lot of expertise and leadership to this organization.
And he brought dignity. You know, we were young and crazy, and he was the dignified, well-dressed, handsome man at all the events, you know.
And so,
he was great.
He's gone on to his reward, but what a great contributor to our community
Yes.
he was.
I think of him a lot.
Well, it's amazing. And so the barbecue began. And when you look at what the barbecue is now, you said $62,000 total budget for the whole month of Memphis in May. That's $2,000 a day when you think about that, all right? Now it's $10 million. An incredible growth. I mean, if you did the math on that, I don't know what that is, but
It grew unbelievably. We started out with $7,000 for the first barbecue contest. We doubled it the next year. The next year we asked Deacon Alley to come in with us, and we both put $25,000 into the contest. When I was chair, the last year I was a chair, our budget alone was $385,000. So it just kept growing, and people...
just for the barbecue?
Just for barbecue.
$385,000.
Right. So we had about 800 volunteers. Many of them were volunteers for other events as well. And so, but it was just so much fun that people wanted to be part of it. And it was people from all over the city. We had all sorts of teams from the city, but we also started bringing people from the outskirts of the community, and eventually we started having sanctioned contests that brought people from Ireland, from Europe, other places where they'd have contests as well. And so we had the creme de la creme of barbecue.
And you know, so many people formed teams and invited their friends from, we had 5 or 6 people coming from Memphians who'd moved to other places coming back to be on the team.
That's right.
You know, it was a magnet for tourism. And businesses used that as a focal point for conferences and to entertain people who needed to come to Memphis on business. I mean, it's just worked.
It made us a cosmopolitan international city.
It did.
Honoring these 38 countries. Amazing. Now, you touched your crown over here. Let's show our audience this great crown. This is Denise Bollheimer and her crown of rib bones. And you were awarded this because you worked on barbecue how many years?
11.
And so the budget grew to $385,000, 800 volunteers, thousands and thousands of people. And these barbecue teams have stuck together. And sometimes the children and grandchildren of the original barbecue team members have gone on to carry forward their family tradition.
Absolutely.
With the bones, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, that's great. That's great. Well, thank you for that. Now, when we look back on this great history, and when you see what's going on with Memphis in May now in terms of the Beale Street Music Festival and how popular it is, the barbecue, and what a huge success it is. These are two huge weekends that are driving a lot of hotel room stays in our city. The hoteliers in our city are counting on
They are.
these
Sold
dates.
out.
Lucrative
It's your
month.
favorite word.
But when you think about it, all these hot lists that I mentioned early in the program with our previous guests, what do you think? When you look back, what's on you, Denise?
Well, it makes me really proud of our city, and that it shows that people really can come together and really make a difference, and that they don't have to be all alike. I mean, we had, women and men on the board or in the committees. We had African Americans. We started having people from other cultures and other countries that would get excited about being involved. So Memphis can do a lot of things, and what you learn from what we did in Memphis, you could do it in other places that really need to come together as well. It's good for the world.
It's a template.
And our group never knew the word no. If an idea came up, it was yes, we can figure out how to do that. And the enthusiasm just was self-generating to new ideas. And it went on like that for a long time. We had a template of the major events, but each year became an opportunity to reinterpret a foreign country and bring their arts and their dance and their crafts to Memphis. And how did we put them in the community, and how do we introduce them to the children in the schools through the school program? It became a confidence builder for our community and for our children, and we still don't know the word no.
I think that it's interesting too that most of the people, we really didn't have a lot of hired people. We didn't have hired experts. The people that put this together, everyday citizens who could make a difference.
And another important aspect, as you mentioned, in the international flavor, of course, Japan was the first honored country. And two executives from Datsun Forklift out on Brooks Road were part of the original board, who ultimately brought the Japanese ambassador to the city of Memphis. The governor came to introduce him at the Rotary Club. And from that incredible confluence of events came Sharp Electronics. 40 years ago this year, it's the 40th anniversary of Sharp coming. And because the Japanese felt so welcomed in Memphis, Tennessee, and because of the honoring that Memphis did to Japan that year, 1,200 jobs came through Sharp. Since then, 199 Japanese companies have invested in Memphis, making Tennessee the #1 state in America for Japanese companies. California has more investment, but we have the most Japanese companies, and it's got to be in Tennessee because of that incredible beginning. Great things can come from Memphis, Tennessee. Start something great in Memphis used to be one of our catchphrases and mottos here. And this is something great that started with Jeann Arthur and Denise Bollheimer and a cast of devoted Memphians who wanted to make a difference in our city, have fun, and see Memphians come back to the river and come back downtown, spark the economy, and put cash money down south of our pockets and joy in our hearts. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Revival Memphis, the Memphis in May Founders Story. We look forward to seeing you again next month.
You're watching the Library Channel, a broadcast service of the Memphis Public Libraries and the City of Memphis.